Maybe I need to turn this up. Hello everyone. Thanks for showing up. Can you hear me? If you can, just do me a favor and drop it in the chat. You need to turn this up. Okay, looks like you weren't able to before. I think I turned up the mic here, so maybe something will show up now. If you can, just do me a favor and drop it in the chat. Okay, looks like you weren't able to before. I think I turned up the mic here, so. Okay, cool. It looks like people can hear me now. Sounds good. Yeah, once again, thanks for showing up, everybody. Today, basically, I'm just going to be doing a walkthrough of medical robot, so something that would be assisting a surgeon during surgery. Sounds good. I don't actually know what a whole lot of these look like. I looked up some reference beforehand, and I just figured we'd improvise on this. So, something that would be assisting a surgeon during surgery. Now what we're going to do is set up our environment. So, first thing we're going to do is, this is the default environment, just a pretty blank warehouse, and then we can see the X, Y, and Z right here. So what we're going to do is press the blue menu button, and if you've used Gravity Sketch before, you know that the left hand is for everything menus. So we're going to press the blue menu button, go to Settings, and Workspace. Now, there's the presets above here that you can toggle through and select, and these are pretty great. But if you want a little more control, we can come down here to Custom, turn on Gradient, and I like this sky tone gradient that goes all the way down to a light blue, so we're going to stick with that. And then if you did want to adjust the lighting direction, you can grab the flashlight here, choose a direction for that lighting. It's a little easier to see if we actually sketch something in here. So you can see how that's affecting the geometry. And then once you have that selected and you want to get rid of this flashlight, just grab it, hold it, and delete it with the red button, the same way you would delete geometry. Okay, awesome. Next thing I'm going to do is actually set up a few things that I like to use before, designing something or starting a project. So for that, same section, Settings, but I'm going to go into this subfolder up here called Sketching Aid. And we already have World Axes on. That's great. We're going to leave that on. And I'm going to turn on the mirror option right here, which now we can start sketching symmetrically. And then this is an option that I turn on and off throughout the, sketching or designing something, which is vertical lock. And that's just going to make it so that the y-axis is always facing up, and yeah, it just adds a little more control to your space. Okay. So I see somebody said you can hear me twice. I think I might have fixed that. Just let me know if that works. And if it doesn't, then I can go back and troubleshoot it again. All right, cool. So considering the fact that we're making a piece of surgical equipment, and this is going to be performing, or a system performing operations on the human body, we're going to want to design this so that it's at human scale. So to do that, let's press the blue menu button here, go to Prefabs, and we have these built-in models, and that's of course under the built-in model tab. You can also bring in your own models here, and we might do that later, but for right now we're just going to leave it on built-in models and focus on grabbing one of these mannequins out and using them. So you can grab a mannequin, drag them out like this, and start to use them in your scene. You can scale them up and down, do all sorts of things, but it's not at one-to-one scale. It's just at whatever scale you were at whenever you dragged it out into the space. And we want to make sure that our mannequins are at one-to-one scale so that we can start designing with confidence, that the solution we're building is actually going to help people in real life. So let's grab the mannequin out like this, and then once you're holding the mannequin, you'll see this option on the right-hand side here turns blue. It turns into this little blue bin, and it says drop here to preview import. So we're going to hold that over the blue bin until it turns green, and then let go. And now we have this menu here, and we can see that the mannequin is actually placed pretty precisely in the space, but it's not actual geometry. We can't grab it yet. It's just previewed there. So because of that, we're going to take a look here and focus on this side of the menu. So here we have arrows that we can click and have this guy face a bunch of different directions. We have a measurement here, so it's 170 centimeters. And then if we happen to be really zoomed out or lost, we can click Locate Preview here, and that's going to zoom us all the way to where it's being placed. So it looks like we're good to go on all this. The last thing we need to do here is choose solidify the selection. So we could cancel it, or we can press the blue check mark here and import that model. And now that we've imported it, we can actually grab and move this guy around like he's an actual piece of geometry now that we can use. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's take this guy, put him into edit mode. So to put anything into edit mode, grab, hold, and press the blue menu button. Don't worry about moving it off of its original location whenever you're doing this, because as soon as you apply an action, like putting it into edit mode, it snaps right back into place, and then you're able to, adjust that geometry. So these green points here are really helpful because they very naturally move all the joints for a dedicated part of the body. So in this case, I'll grab the wrist and I can move this entire arm around. Now, keep in mind, this is really useful for some things, but other parts of the body, it's not that great. For the leg, it kind of gives a little bit of funkiness here. And that's totally fine, because if you flick the joystick to the right or left, you'll toggle between these large green gestural points and these very precise individual points for each part of the body here. So, we could do things like the elbows or the shoulders, or even zoom in here and adjust things all the way down to the knuckles. So just keep that in mind. If you have a mannequin in edit mode, your joystick on your right-hand controller, flick between these 2 points. Okay, great. So this is a good mannequin to have because it's facing upwards, and so that could stand in as a representation for the doctor or one of the surgical nurses. So let's move that off to the side, and let's actually duplicate another one here. And what I want to do is rotate this guy so that it's representing the patient here. So there's 2 ways of rotating things in Gravity Sketch. You can take your controllers, face them together like this. Don't press any buttons, just face them together like this. And then actually highlight a specific piece of geometry. And what that's going to do is populate this little piece of UI between your controllers that will highlight in the color of the axes that you're going to rotate along, right? So if it highlights in red, I'm rotating on the x-axis. If it's highlighting blue, that's the z-axis. So that's one way of rotating. Highlight, get that UI to show up so that you know you're locked, and then hold the grab button and you can twist your right wrist. And that's a pretty free way of rotating. A more exact way of rotating is to actually use the tool belt. So you can access the tool belt by holding the grab trigger and swinging across your body like this. And so that's going to help you put on and off the tool belt. But you might not have tool belt as a feature enabled. So to enable it as a feature so that you can access it in this way, press the blue menu button here, go to Settings, and then go to the Beta tab here. So again, that's one of those subfolders up here. Click Beta, and here you have a bunch of different features that you can actually add. Contextual measurements is really great, and I'll show you that in a little bit. You can access the grid here and change the density, and then you have the tool belt up here. So you can see it says enabled, flick that to the left, disabled. So we're just gonna make sure we have that on, and then we can close that menu. So now I'll swing across my body and put on the tool belt. We have a couple of selections here. We're just gonna worry about this one here. So this one, you reach out and you actually grab it like a piece of geometry. And yeah, this is the precision tool. So if you look really close there in the center, right now, it's on an option for basically moving precisely along an axis or along a plane. And that's pretty great, but we want to use rotation, so we're going to flick, while holding this, flick the joystick on the right-hand controller to the left or right, and that's going to allow us to toggle from movement to rotation. And now we can just click, point, and let me get to a better position here. Maybe it's because I have the tool belt in the way. Okay, there we go. And then rotate. So this is kind of nice because we have contextual measurements on. We can see exactly how far we're rotating this. And what you'll notice is it's pretty free right now. Like it's not snapping to, let's say, 5, 10, or 15 degree increments. But we can do that by holding this and pressing this snap button right there. So once you press that, now when we rotate, we can rotate in 15 degree increments. So I'm going to make that 90 degrees. I'm going to delete this guy and then swipe across my body and get rid of the tool belt. So great, now we have somebody standing in for our doctor. Actually, I'll just rotate the doctor like that. Can duplicate this out for a nurse. And then we have our patient here on the table. And again, we could put this into edit mode and move the arms so that they're like this, maybe even grab the body and tilt it up a little bit like that. Yeah, that's probably too much. Okay, cool. So now we have our, our context here, our people, and we can start designing around this. So what I'm going to do here, just to clean things up a little bit in the environment, so I don't accidentally shift, one of our subjects here, we can go to the blue menu button and go to layers. And this is very similar to Photoshop. You can create new layers like this with the plus sign. You can delete them like you would delete geometry. So grab them, hold them, press the red button, and you'll get a warning here. It says you can't undo a deleted layer. So keep that in mind. If you delete something and you accidentally had some geometry on it, once you click this here, it's gone. And then we can name our layers here as well. So we're going to name these. These are our peeps. And this is our sketch. And we're going to lock the layer with the people on it and make sure that this magnifying glass here, this toggle solo layer, is on our new layer here, so that anything that we create is now going to be populated on the sketch layer instead of our people layer. Great. So the last thing I'll do is probably turn down the visibility a little bit. And then, yeah, we're good to go. We can start sketching. So actually, before we start sketching, I'm going to go to Settings, Sketching Aid, and turn on Stage Floor here. So you have a couple of selections here. You can have it off all the way to the left, a rounded stage floor, and a square stage floor. And this is just going to give me something to build to so that I know, how things are going to interact, where the wheels are going to be, all that kind of stuff. All right, so now that I've done that, I can press the blue menu button, get rid of that. And the nice thing about the stage floor is it auto updates. So if we zoom out here and we keep creating geometry, it's going to auto update and expand that stage floor to fit the context of what we're designing. All right, so before I get started sketching, I'm just going to take a look at the comments here, see if I have any other audio problems or if we're good to go. It's fixed now. All right, great. How's your hand, by the way, Mr. Lukas? Actually, that's Jaron that has the hand injury right now. I think you guys should see him Tuesday next week. All right, let's start sketching. So right now, I'm just going to make kind of like this futuristic looking, or maybe not futuristic, but modern looking patient table. So I'm going to sketch some loose lines like this. And those will be the rear wheels for the table, or the rear legs, I should say. And this will be the front wheels. And then let's sketch the actual bed that the patient is going to be on. And because we're sketching right now, we're not focused on having something super exact. We just want to get the idea down. And so you're going to see me be pretty loose here. And that's okay, because we can actually grab and move these lines around to make sure they're doing, what we want. And yeah, this is where we're doing all the thinking. We're not actually building right now, so it's okay to be very loose here. Okay, so one thing I'm noticing here is I'm trying to sketch a side view for this bed. And it's very difficult to do this in Gravity Sketch normally, without applying any parameters, because we're sketching in 3D space, right? So each sketch line we make can be moving along Z, X, and Y. like that. And what we want to do is constrain it so that it's between two of these axes, right? So we're only sketching along X and Y. So we can actually do this by pressing the purple button, which is the Tools menu. And as you can see, we already have the ink tool selected. But if we click it one more time, we get this panel with a bunch of different parameters that we can apply to the ink tool, right? And you could do this for any of the tools down here if you cycle through them. So now that we have this, we have a bunch of options. We're only going to turn on one, the planer tool right here. So as soon as we turn that on, and I'll just close the menu now, that stylus on my hand has disappeared, and now I have this laser, and it's kind of connected to the floor. And so this is pretty great. Basically, I can sketch along a flat plane like this, and it's very useful, but we need this flat plane here, not on the floor. So to place this, this plane, hold in the pointer finger on your left-hand controller and just move it around in the environment. Find a place you want to put it, and then when you let go, your selection has been made. And so now I can start sketching on a flat plane here, which is great, but it's not very exact, right? It's not along X, Y, or Z. It's just kind of freely placed in the space. So to place it precisely along, connected to an axis, you want to make sure your controller is parallel to the axes you want to snap to, so X, Y, or Z. So we're going to stick with Y here. And then half hold the pointer finger trigger. And again, we get a UI indicator here that we're actually locked into a certain axis. So in this case, it's highlighting green, and I'm locked in the Y axis this entire time. And if I just move it close to the mirror plane here, so the center, then you'll see it kind of magnetically attaches to the mirror plane. And now that I have that, I can start sketching, and I can see with confidence that that is actually attached to the mirror plane. Okay, so objective achieved. We're sketching on a flat surface here on the mirror plane. But one thing I want to do before I sketch this side view here is make this a little more comfortable for myself. So for instance, if you were to see me in real life right now sketching, I'm essentially standing, or sitting completely vertical, and this is similar to sketching on a whiteboard or some surface that is also completely vertical. And when you're sketching things naturally, it might be on a table or a Cintiq or something like that. It's usually at an angle like this. So we can come in here to the blue menu button, go to settings, and turn off vertical lock. And once we turn off vertical lock, now I can position this so it's a little more comfortable. I can rotate it all the way around. And now I can come in here and very comfortably sketch the bottom side of this table. All right. And by the way, if you have planer tool on, you can also snap it this way and have something similar to a section line. So if you're an automotive designer, section lines are really important for identifying what your surfaces are doing, and then they can also help somebody understand the proportion of your vehicle. So in this product design sense, it's just going to tell us exactly what the shape of this table is doing. All right. So that's a good enough sketch for what we're going to build on this table. We're going to keep it simple. And I'm going to go back here to the ink tool, turn off planer, and yeah, now we have our raw sketch. And so let's start building this out with different types of geometry. What I'm going to do now is create a new layer here. Let's name this, just surface. And we're going to lock the sketch layer, turn down the people layer all the way so that we're just focused on the table for right now, and then turn down the visibility on the sketch just a little bit, just enough so that we can reference it still. And of course, make sure that the eyeglass layer is on the active layer that you want. So in that case, it's the surface layer. And yeah, now we're going to start to construct this table. So there's all sorts of ways that you can do surfacing in Gravity Sketch, but the simplest way of doing surfacing is to press the purple menu button, go to Primitive Shapes here, click it twice, And you could either start off with a primitive shape like this, or you can start off with a piece of subdivision, a subdivision object. So in this case, we're just going to start with a subdivided object. We're going to click this here, and you'll see it gets rid of all the shapes that you can't use when using Sub-D. And so by default, we have the cube here. That's perfect for what we're working on. I'm going to close this menu, press the pointer finger on the left-hand controller and the right-hand controller, and preview this shape. Now, we're not being super precise, so I'm just going to drop it in here. Anywhere will do. And let's change the color and the material. I like to work with tune material here because it just really boldens the outside or the outer line of the shape. Helps give me a better idea of what things are doing. So anyways, we're just going to move it here, grab it, put it into edit mode, move the face close to the mirror plane here so that it's connected, and start duplicating out these shapes here and really box in the shape of this medical table. Okay, so right now we have like just the boxed out version of this table, and this is a good starting place for us. If we want to see what this looks like smoothed off, we can take a look at our edit panel here on the left-hand controller and turn on this option here that says Subdivision Level. So if we swing that all the way to the right, we get this surfboard looking table, and that is the raw shape that we had with smoothing applied to it. So it's looking pretty good. And now what we can do is actually start to shift things around and add more detail. So if you want to click in a new row of edge loops, you just point somewhere along an edge, press the pointer finger trigger, and you can drop in a whole new loop. If we want to duplicate a surface up, you can grab that face. Duplicate a face up, you can grab the face, press the pointer finger trigger, and then you can scale it by going left and right on your joystick. So we have this kind of raised section here for the patient's neck, and I think that option works well there. We can duplicate a surface up and have this risen section. Yeah, if we wanted to tighten up this radius a bit, we could click and drop in a whole new edge loop going this way, and then, yeah, add some shape to the bed like this. Could drop in another loop like that. So the tools in Sub-D are pretty simple. Basically, you're just adding edge loops, moving faces around, and that's about it. So once you know those features, pretty much good to go. You'll see that I'm using Smart Move also here to start moving around edit points in a very exact fashion. So for instance, under here, I'm using Smart Move to move them along the Z-axis here. And so if you haven't used Smart Move before, I'll just demonstrate that real quick here, just make some scrap geometry. So what you want to do is align your controllers head to toe parallel with the axes that you want to move along. Don't press any buttons, just align them like this, and then highlight geometry, and you'll get that same UI again. You'll see it in a third place here. So once you're locked to that axis, it will actually highlight and create this UI between your controllers. Once you have that, you know you're good to go, and you just press the grab trigger like this, and you can move along X, Y, and Z. If you're trying that and you're not having any success, you know, try navigating to a more comfortable angle and then see if you can actually lock to that location. And then if it's still not working for you, you should probably do this first actually. Go to the blue menu button, click Settings, and make sure you have Smart Move enabled here under Sketching Aid. Settings, Sketching Aid, Smart Move. You have three options: off, X, Y, and Z, and all directions. All directions gets kind of confusing because it allows you to, you know, move precisely in any direction. It definitely can be useful, but at first I would suggest turning it on to X, Y, and Z, because those are the axes that you can actually see and interact with. All right, we're going to do a little more work on this table, just shifting some things around, and then start getting into building the robot. All right, I'll drop in a few more edge loops there and shift them around so we have some more defined radiuses or radii. And yeah, actually, this is looking really good. We can just leave this as a base layer right now. You can always come back, add to it, design it, but it's good to just leave it at that simple level right there. All right, now what I'm going to do is actually design the legs here. It's just going to be a simple stand-in. So what we're going to do is, instead of building it out of sub-D geometry, just going to press the purple menu button here, stick with the stroke tool, and turn it on point mode. And then we can close that. So you can adjust the size of your stroke, or the stylus I should say, by going left and right on your joystick. So let's just get something that looks decent. That's good, and we can always adjust it in post. And what point mode allows me to do is, instead of sketching freely like we did with the ink tool, I can just drop an edit point every single time I press the pointer finger trigger, and when I want to close it off, press the pointer finger trigger on the opposite hand. All right, so that looks decent for one leg. Let's do the next one here. Close it off, put it in edit mode, and yeah, so one thing you might notice is that I'm putting a lot of things that I sketch into edit mode, and the reason for that is, at least, you know, this is just for me, I'm sure there are other people that sketch very precisely. I don't find that I can ever make something perfect in the first try in Gravity Sketch. Usually it's a process of sketching something close and then putting it into edit mode and adjusting it. And I found that I like that better because it takes the, I guess, the anxiety of doing a perfect line away, and it's so iterative that I can always put it in edit mode and fix it. So here, now that we have it in edit mode, we can take a look at the panel on our left-hand controller. We have this graph, and we can actually change the shape type of this as well. So I'm going to give it more of an oval shape like this, and let's color this differently so we can separate it from everything else we're looking at. So again, in edit mode, if you see, that oval shape is traveling in a different direction as we progress through the curve here. And so we can actually change that and adjust it by flicking right on the joystick here, and then we get these arrows here. These are the normals, and we can shape that even further, like this. And flick back the other way to shut it off, and then we can actually taper this line as well by grabbing edit points and going left and right on the joystick. So we can get some pretty interesting shapes without having to model anything. This is just the stroke tool, and we're adjusting things as we go. So I'm going to do the same thing back here with this guy. Give it somewhat of an oval shape. And let's see what those normals are doing. I actually kind of like it flat here and then rotating in a different direction. It makes it look dynamic. All right, flick back to the other normal edit points, and then grab some of these and scale them up so that the leg looks beefier here than it does over there. All right, let's grab that, make it all the same color here, and I'm going to take a look at the comments now. All right, so we have one, how do you know how deep you're sketching since it's VR? Okay. Yeah, I love this when people are answering the questions in the chat. Did I say what platform I'm using today? Okay, so basically today what I'm using is an Oculus Quest 2, and then I bought the Oculus Link cable and I hooked it up to my laptop so that I can stream things in really high quality for you guys. If you hook up a Quest 2 to your computer, if you have a powerful enough computer, it gives you some better visualization options, and it also gives you this orthographic view that I can show you guys right now. So again, this is when you've hooked up your laptop or your headset to your laptop with the Oculus Link cable. Basically, we get this option here, orthographic, and so you can actually pull these views off and leave them in your space. And the really nice thing about them is, let me change my stroke color to red, they are auto-updated. So as I'm sketching things here, you can see it being affected in those viewports. Delete it, and it deletes it. And then one last feature for these things is you can take a screenshot in the bottom of each one of these panels, and it saves as a PNG, and that's really useful for when you're designing. You can take those screenshots progressively and see the progression of your design. So we'll just delete those. The other thing that hooking it up to your computer offers you is these reflective materials here. So you'll notice if you just have your Oculus Quest and you turn on, or you enact a reflective material here, like it looks good. It looks plenty good to like evaluate surfaces, but it's just a little bit better when you hook up the link cable. So definitely something to consider. But now that we have our bed, let's go back to the layers panel here. Let's turn down the sketch now. We don't really need that anymore. And then let's lock this and create a new layer here for the robot. Oh, robot. All right, we'll stick with that. And again, that's active. And now we can come in here and actually start sketching out the robot. So like let's turn on the people again, all the way like this, and then I'm going to grab them and make them the same color as the table and the same material, just so we have something uniform to look at. And let's lock the people again because we don't want to shift or move them around. Actually, before locking the people, let's move the doctor forward a bit here and just see like arm height wise, are we correct here? You know, this is one of the nice things that you can do in Gravity Sketch is because you have these models. You can evaluate, you know, the ergonomics or the usability of your product very well, or pretty accurately, I should say. And so now what I'm seeing is like, you know, obviously this is a little bit low. So I'm going to group the table and the guy here, and let's just shift that up a couple of inches. I think, you know, somewhere around 3.5 inches is good. And we'll add some beefy tires to this table in a little bit, but for now this is good enough. This lets us know that it's a comfortable height for him to be working on. And we can lock the people, and we can lock the table as well, or the surface, and now we can sketch our robot. So let's go to the ink tool here, again, purple tools menu, ink tool, and let's make this a nice dark black color here so we can really see these lines. And yeah, let's start sketching the idea of this robot, what it's going to look like. I'm trying to think if I want to do this symmetrically or not. Yeah, it's probably best to do it symmetrically. So we'll sketch it here because this is where the mirror axis is, right? Makes no sense to sketch it over here because all that geometry is not usable. And yeah, let's just get some loose ideas down. So like first, let's start with like a wheelbase, but maybe not something that sticks out too far. And we'll make proper wheels in a bit, but for right now, again, we are sketching out the idea. So all we need is indication. Maybe it has a pivot point right here that drops down for the wheel, like that. Kind of like the look at that. And by the way, if you have an opportunity to duplicate geometry instead of creating new stuff, do it. Use the smart move, duplicate it over. Now we have 2 wheels, easy, and we didn't need to build it. All right, and now let's swing this up into, let's say like a base for the robot. So maybe this is where, actually that's kind of a cool idea. Maybe this robot actually has an onboard battery, and that way it doesn't need to be plugged in, it can move around. Or maybe if power goes out, you know, you're not completely screwed because you have a battery supply on there. All right, and let's swing that up into what I guess we'll call is the upper body of this thing. Again, just sketching loosely, just getting the thinking out. And by the way, if you guys have any comments on the design or ideas, please do drop them in the chat. I'll take a look and see if we could work some of them in. All right, so what we have right here, I like so far because we have movement on the wheels. They can rotate freely in well, at least a certain degree. All four of them turn, and then we have this nice sturdy base coming up into a pivot point for the upper body, and then we have this hinge thing here. Let's see if we can group it and sort of move it along. I mean, it's mirrored right now, so it's kind of hard to see, but it can rotate in that direction. And now let's start to think about how this is going to interface with everything else. Okay, so I think one thing that would be important to have is a tray for the, maybe not the tools for the doctor or the surgeon, but the tools for the machine. So maybe it doesn't even look like a tray and it looks more like a shelf like this. And then there's sections that hold the different bits that it's going to use, like that. And then the arm can just drop in here, grab a new bit, take it, and start to use it. So yeah, this looks pretty decent. We can think about that idea. And then of course we're going to need, you know, a spot for at minimum 2 arms here. So something, let's just loosely sketch it out like that. Probably have an elbow, and then, you know, a section where it actually connects these different bits, whether it be, you know, some surgical knife or some pliers, something like that. So let's think about the location for these shoulders. We could move it up like that. Oh, that's kind of cool. Okay, so we can split the shelf and put it here so that the tools are here, and then the shoulders are up here, like that. It's not the prettiest thing right now, so it's all right, we'll focus on that in a little bit. And then this probably needs some vision, but so yeah, we can put sensors here, like that, up top here, and then also sensors in the arms as well, some cameras and sensors there. So, I mean, generally this is something we could work with. Like, it's not a terrible shape. Let's see what you guys have dropped in the comments and work with that. Yeah, you can change the sphere size. I'll show you that in a little bit. That's called the grab sphere, so that you can grab more or less points. Yes, you can crease the subdivision edges. I'll show you guys that in a second. We'll worry about that once we start to get into surfacing for the machine or the robot. Okay, wider footprint for the legs. That's a good note. What we can do is actually make them adjustable so that maybe it stores away, you know, very compact, and then it can have more stabilization whenever it needs it. Right, you've enjoyed it so far. Awesome. Glad to hear that we're, you know, that we're beating out SolidWorks. SolidWorks is still great for, you know, everything it does, but this is definitely a loose way of thinking. Some level collapsibility. Yes, agreed. To the robot so it can be easily packed away. Okay, cool. Yeah, we were just talking about that. I like that because you know, there's a ton of equipment in a medical office, so, you know, it being packed away is definitely really important. We could probably make the arms, let's draw this with big bold lines first. Let me make it a different color. We could probably make the arms so that they're different sections like this, and then they at least somewhat fold into each other like that and compact. And actually, this is probably the best way of troubleshooting that right now, is just with giant strokes like this. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Actually, that looks pretty compact, I think, at least. And I'm trying to think if we're missing anything else. But, you know, this is good for now. All right, and as far as the legs go, you know, we can just reach in here and stretch them out like that. But, again, compactability. So let's group these sketch lines together. Oh, sorry. Before we do any of that, someone asked a question about the grab sphere. So you can go up and down on your joystick here, and that allows you to adjust the size of the grab sphere. That is the same grab sphere that you're going to use for edit points. So if you have something in edit mode, of course, same functionality there. So good to go on the grab sphere. As far as here's what we could do. The base getting longer or wider, we can make it so that here it can split out like that and rotate. So we'll work that into the design in a little bit. Right now, I want to figure out the hinges for this guy. So we're going to come here and to the purple menu, primitive shapes, turn off sub D, and you'll see why I'm turning it off in a little bit, and we'll select the cylinder. So let's just preview something, drop it in the space, that's good enough. And let's figure out these hinges. So the reason I turned off sub D for the cylinder is I actually just want to use this as a primitive shape right now. And if you drop a primitive shape in and put it into edit mode, you get these very simple ways of adjusting the size and scale of it. So in this case for the cylinder, I just have two arrows, one for the radius, the other one for the depth of it. And yeah, that's all I want right now because we're just doing this very blocky thinking. So I'm going to place one there for the shoulder. I think that's probably a good place to have it. And let's move this out right now. And one here for the elbow, so something like that. And then we can have this one turned sideways like this for the last bit of the arm and where the drill bits will be connected. All right, so that looks pretty decent. I think we have that figured out. And now what we're going to do is actually really zone in or hone in on this robot and get rid of everything else in the space here. So we're going to turn the visibility down by going to the layers panel. I'm going to grab all of this robot, all of the lines that make it up, grab it and press, while I'm holding it, press the purple menu button, and that's going to allow me to group it like this so I can move it easier. And then I'm going to use Smart Move and move it somewhere near the center of our workspace here. Okay, so now that I have that, what I want to do is take this loose sketch and do a tight sketch over top of it so that I know exactly what the design is going to be, and I have something that will help me whenever I'm doing surfacing. So for that, let's create a new layer and let's call this clean line. All right, and keep in mind this is just one way of working. This is just the way that I like to build out projects, but there's really no right or wrong way in Gravity Sketch to get at the result that you're trying to get at. So let's turn on the visibility for the robot or the robit and lock it. I don't want to be moving these sketch lines around. I just want to use them as reference for right now. All right, the last thing I want to do here is, of course, make sure this layer is active. And then let's go back to the stroke tool here. We have it on point mode. That's good. So now we can click and add a point every time we click. And let's make this a dark black again, or dark blue, something like that. All right, great. So now that we have that, I want to hone in the side view or the center line for this this robot. So again, go back here, turn on the planar tool. We're going to do what we did earlier and snap it to center line like that. And now what we can do is just click out the lines for this guy. Let's just keep it simple right now like that. Keep the shape very simple, I mean. Like this. And like that. And by the way, I just figured out one other thing that I'd like for this robot to have, and that is a small screen on it so that you can see what it's seeing. Excuse me. Or a touch screen that you can interface with it. So before we go any further, I just want to drop that in. So we're going to go to primitive shape, cube, and I'm going to show you another pretty useful feature here. So if we just go to primitive shape and select cube, we can make something kind of the size of a screen, right? And we want to place it exact along center line, but Actually, that's pretty good. But you'll see there's, you know, it's not precise. It's really tough to place a primitive shape precisely in the space. So what we'll use here is another beta feature, settings, beta, grid tool. So let's turn on the grid. And once you turn it on, you see all these floating dots around. That is the grid. And then you can click and drop in a shape very easily, and it's placed very precisely. Now, that's all we need the grid for. We can come in here again and turn it off. And by the way, this is on and off, and this is enabling it and disabling it. And now that it was placed precisely, we actually don't need to worry about the grid anymore. We can just shape it, convert it to sub D, and all our other movements are very precise. So usually I just use grid for placing objects. And then after that, I turn it off. So let's shape this to be a good screen size here. Let's make it a little smaller. It's not going to be our main visual, right? Because that would probably happen on an external screen somewhere. This is going to be something that applies just to the robot. And we'll hang it somewhere low like this. And yeah, actually now that we've placed it, we can even provide a track here so that this screen can move up and down. So it could probably even lift up that high, and then we'll give it a pivot point here as well. This is actually a really good product to figure out in Gravity Sketch because there's so many pivot points and so, you know, a lot of complexity to it. Maybe not this one, but the actual product. All right, so now that we have that, let's just drop that on the robot layer as well. Ghost it out there. We could just use it as reference. And yeah, let's continue with the side view. So back to the stroke tool here. Let's get the inside shape. Close that off. Put it into edit mode and just, you know, tighten it up a little bit. Shift that out, or actually, let's shift this in a bit. All right, that looks decent. And then the next thing I'm going to do is take the plane and snap it in this direction, just like we were doing for those section views, and make the very first part of the leg, and then duplicate this out going that way. All right, and again, like I said before, if you don't need to make more geometry, don't, just duplicate what you have. So I'm going to duplicate that line down, and then, you know, of course, put it into edit mode, mess around with it a bit like that, and we just saved ourselves some extra work. Actually, this would look better if it was shifted in. All right, that's looking good. Okay, and let's actually, we'll save that for a little bit. Okay, let's make some wheels as well. So before we finish our line drawing, I'm going to make some wheels. Let's create a new layer here, name it wheels. All right, make sure we're active here, and then we're going to start making wheels with the revolve tool. But before we go into the revolve tool, let's check out the questions, see if there's anything. Question about selecting points in sub D. Answer was possible to select the loop. Possible to choose the points. Yeah. So what is that? Okay. Yeah, the shift function. That's a really good note, and something that's, you know, it's important when you're sketching and modeling things. I think we have a couple of designs in-house that we came up with shift selecting, but we like to do a lot of testing before we actually roll it out to you know, to everybody to use. So it is something we're working on. I don't know if it's going to be an official feature one day, if you know, how soon it's going to be released, any of those details. But yeah, great point, and thanks for bringing it up. Doesn't look like there's any questions, so let's just launch into making the wheels here. Okay, so you've selected the revolve tool here, and you can place it by holding in the pointer finger controller, pointer finger trigger on the left hand controller, And when you let go, you've made a selection and you can start sketching, right? So this is great, and it's great for, you know, freely placing the axes anywhere and starting to make some shapes. But, you know, we're doing industrial design and we need a little more precision, and we want this to be, you know, snapped along an axis. So no problem, you can do that. Hold in the pointer finger controller halfway, so feather hold the controller, the trigger, and rotate it in the direction of the axes that you want to snap to. So in this case, I'm snapped to X, and I'm just gonna, you know, hold it and move it to the location I want. And then once I have it there, I'm just gonna make that loose sketch. And again, I can never make that perfect sketch line, at least me. So I like to make a loose shape like this. Once I have that loose shape, grab it, hold it, put it into edit mode. If this menu gets annoying and you want to hide it, you can press the purple menu button here. That's going to minimize it. You're still in edit mode though. And once I've done that, I can actually come in here and start to shape these wheels. And, you know, we'll make them kind of beefy. Okay, great. So that's the tire section. So this is the rubber of the wheel. And I'm going to take that out of edit mode now. What I want to do is create now the actual inner plastic or metal rim for it. So I usually change it to a different color just so I can separate it and, you know, see where things are touching down. And then I make the inner rim for that. All right, so that, yeah, you know, we can go in and add more detail here if we want, and I kind of can't help myself from adding more detail, so I'm going to do that real quick. Okay, there we go. We have our shape. We have our general, you know, wheel shape here. Let's grab it, hold it, group it together, and duplicate that guy out for the front. All right, and for this pivot point, I'm going to save that for later because I think I'm going to make that out of Sub-D and not the revolve tool. So in case anybody was wondering, if you make a revolve shape like this and take it into edit mode, you do not have an option here to convert it to Sub-D. So when it comes to cylindrical shapes, try and plan that out a little bit. You might want to use, you know, a Sub-D cylinder instead of you know, the revolve tool because you might want to intersect geometry with it. Again, I'll show that in a little bit. Let's make these the same color and material. And yeah, I think we can start getting into surfacing a little bit. Yeah, let's just adjust some of these lines here. All right, and we'll come back here to point mode, and let's at least add one section through this here. So we'll start up here. That's where our sensor head is going to be. This is where the shoulders are going to be. And then of course that's going to dip in here so that we can house the arms. And then we have this cut in right here. All right, and then the profile for this shape I'll just duplicate and adjust. Okay, so let's just change that the same color so, you know, looks the same. Just doing a few odds and ends things here. Oh, and the bottom here. So I think I want a flat spot and then have that curve in. All right, cool. Good to go. All right, I lied to you. We're going to do another section over here. So I'm just going to duplicate this over and shift it up. And because we already have the line, just put this guy in edit mode. And add the detail like this. And this is something that you might discover when you're doing some surfacing. Let's say you're doing surfacing from curves. So let's use this as an example here. I'll just blow this up and turn off planer. Okay, so you'll see here I wanted a little bit of a flat spot there, and you know, it's going to need to be a tighter radius. So you can achieve a tighter radius by clicking in more edit points. That's pretty intuitive to understand when you're first using the you know, the stroke tool here. But there's another way of achieving a tighter radius here, and that other way is to grab that edit point and add weight to it. And the way we add weight to an edit point is by grabbing it, holding it, and going up and down on the joystick. So this is a really useful feature, but you want to keep one thing in mind if you're going to do surfacing with the stroke line that you made. And that is, if you're planning to use these curves to make a surface between, and you have weighted NURBS, when you make that surface, oops, here with bridge curves, it will struggle sometimes with the weighted NURBS, and it will struggle less if you have more edit points. So just keep that in mind. In here, it's not too bad, and we can always, you know, put the surface into edit mode and adjust it, but keep in mind that if you're going to make a surface between two curves, you generally want to avoid using weighted NURBS. All right, so now we're ready to surface, and you saw a little bit of that there. What we're going to do is use these curves to create surfaces. So we will select the surface tool here, and this is what it looks like normally. On the graph, it has some tension, which allows you to sketch with some shape. It's turned to simplified geometry, and it's on mixed input mode, so that it allows you to just very freely put down some shapes. Because we're doing an industrial design project, and we have curves that we created that are nice and clean that we can create surfaces between and use, we're going to adjust some of the options on here to fit that better. First, we're going to go from simplified geometry type and slide it all the way to sub D. You have some new options up here. We're not going to worry about that right now. We're just going to make sure that the geometry type is sub D. The other thing we're going to do is we don't want curvature in our surface. We want to add the curvature later to our surface. So we're going to come up here to the graph and drag the initial tension or the curvature all the way down. So now we have nice flat surfaces to work with. And the last thing we're going to do is go from this mixed input mode and select bridge curves. Just like the name suggests, we're going to be able to bridge a surface between the curves. So let's change our surface data to be something else, or be a different color is what I should say, and select two curves and create a surface between them. So right there, we're using that for the base. Let's use it for the inner part right here. And over there. And let's try it. Let's try using that here. We can make a shape right here. And yeah, let's make a shape over here. And then one here. Okay, so what we just did isn't really surfacing, right? It's just sort of piecing together things. But I'll show you how you can take separate surfaces like this and start connecting them together and creating the form. And actually, I'm just noticing if we duplicate this line out like that and lower it to match our side view there, it's going to be a lot easier for us to make surfaces. So now I'm going to just create one here and then create one here. Okay, good. And there. So now we have our surfaces, and what I'm going to do is turn down everything else. I'm going to turn down our robot sketch, and yeah, I'm even going to turn, no, we'll leave the curve here, the curves, but we're going to lock them. Okay, and so this is my mistake. All of the surface geometry is on the wheels layer. So we're just going to create a new surface layer here and grab these surfaces and drop them on that surface layer. Okay, great. So now we have our wheels on a separate layer, our curves on a separate layer. And our surfaces on a separate layer. So let's lock the lines, the wheels, and leave just the surfaces open to be worked on. So as I said before, these are all separate surfaces, and I'm going to demonstrate that by just changing them to be different colors. And then show you what it looks like when we connect them together. All right, cool. So let's do that with these surfaces here. Let's actually start connecting them together. To do that, you can grab a sub-D surface. Only a sub-D surface can do this. Put it into edit mode, and you'll notice that you're seeing the edit points for this surface, but not the other ones. That's because they're not merged together. To merge them together, press this hammer and brush icon, and you have these different tools that can be used only for sub-D geometry. So you only have access to these tools when a piece of sub-D geometry is in edit mode. Select the merge tool, point and click, and now it will change the material type and the shading and the color of that other surface, and it will give you the edit points. So now these are the same surfaces. They might not be connected yet, but they are the same surface. And so now what we can do is actually play this really simple game of basically connect the dots. And so we'll take this dot here for that surface, this dot here for this surface, connect them together, and we'll do the same thing. Oops. Sorry, one second. I'm just going to connect it across the mirror plane. All right, here we go. Same thing down here. And if you have extra edit points like this, just grab the edge, hold it, press the red button, and delete it. And what you're going to see is as we're going through and connecting these together, the shape is starting to blend itself together. Just like that. We get a nice smooth transition here. Now, on this side here, it's connected across the mirror plane. We've dragged the edit points and connected them across the mirror plane, and we get this new piece of UI, this new icon here of a black square with a keyhole in it. On this side, we don't have that. But if we take this and just shift it a little bit, it's connected across the mirror plane. And so you want to make sure you do that so you can see the smooth nature across the mirror plane there. All right. So now let's go back to the merge tool and start merging these other surfaces together. All right, we have some extra edit points up here. That's all right, we'll delete them. Merge this guy over here. And if you have any questions about Sub-D, I can answer some of them here, but we do have a Sub-D video on our YouTube channel, so I highly encourage you to check that out, and that should answer pretty much all the questions you'll have. All right, great. So now we have that shape. Let's come down here, connect this one over here. Again, let's connect it across the mirror plane, and let's thin out some of these edit points. We don't need all these points. If you're wondering, there is no simplify surface like there is with some other tools on Sub-D yet. I'm not sure if that's coming or not. But yeah, just so you know, there isn't. Okay, so what I'm noticing here is I want some more shape here. It's like, you know, it's curving in, but I want a little more of a radius over here. So I can click and add an entire row of edge loops, and then I can shift that row out by turning on this option here on my edit panel, auto select loops. Once I turn on auto select loops, I can grab the entire row and shift that out. I can do the same thing down here and then turn that option off so that I'm not grabbing an entire row again. All right. One, two, three, four. Let's patch that hole. Add this shape here, and just in a second, guys, I'm going to check out questions. So if you have anything, drop it in there. Okay. All right, let's check out some questions. Yeah, okay, cool. Nothing much. All right, so let's keep building this guy out. Let's start down here with the legs and merge all these together here. Oh, so this is another useful thing that I probably should have been doing this whole time, but this is what your sub-D geometry looks like subdivided, obviously, and you can turn that off here with this on-off switch. And sometimes that's a little bit, or sometimes that's helpful so that you can understand, you know, exactly how this geometry is flowing. And then, yeah, see, there we go. It was a little tricky for me to see where all those points were following through. And if I just turn off subdivision, makes it a little easier. All right, now that we have the general shape, we can click in some edge loops here for tighter radius. Yeah, looks good. And we can turn on auto select loops and then drag this entire section here in the middle to the other side and connect it together, just like that. And drop in some new edge loops to tighten things up. You can see I'm not matching this line that well, but actually that's kind of because I like how smooth that inner form is. So I think I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, so this is kind of a bit of a no-no here, but basically when you're designing, when you're modeling something with sub D, you want to make sure you have quads going the entire way through a surface. So I have a bit of a problem area here. I'll just demonstrate this over here. So let's make a sub D surface like this and put it into edit mode and drop in a couple of loops here. And so we can see that it's, we have a four-sided surface everywhere on this geometry. Now, the reason I like sub D is it actually gives you a lot of flexibility when you're building something. Now, we're not modelers right now. We're just designers trying to represent our design in 3D. So what sub D allows you to do is actually grab an edge if you don't have a perfect number or you can't use a quad, and delete it like that. So let's do it here. And you can see that the geometry is compensating for that. Now let's do it on this edge over here. Delete this edit point. You'll see it's just going to make a triangle for us here. Now triangles are not ideal. They're not what you're shooting for, but you have the flexibility to, in like a compromised situation down here, make a triangle. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to click that like that, duplicate out an edge, pop it in right there, and delete that extra edit point. And it's not that big of a deal. The shape is still connected together. It still looks decent. All right, let's try and pick up the speed here a little bit. You'll notice a lot of what I'm doing is actually trying to simplify the amount of geometry that I have here. Again, complexity is, if it's not needed, you want to keep it as simple as possible. And so sometimes I'll just turn on auto edge loops and delete an entire row of edge loops. All right, so for this shape here, I'm going to turn on auto edge loops and duplicate this up. And then once I've duplicated it up, grab it again and go left and right on my joystick and see if scaling is going to help me out here. So because it's an oval, it's scaling more out this way in these directions than it is out in Z. And so it's not going to work for me there. So I'm going to turn that off and just grab the individual edge loop and shift that out like this. Then turn auto edge loops on again, scale it in. All right, and the last thing I want to do on this top part here before looking back at our design is actually connect the bottom here. So we just have a shell right now, and I just want to fill this in here. So that's simple enough. We're going to turn on auto edge loop, grab this loop, hold it, press the pointer finger, duplicate it, and shift it in like that. It's a little difficult to see on the screen, but yeah. All right. Okay, let's check out questions before we move any further. Any anything else? What is the best way to use the thumbstick on the right hand? It seems. Oh, okay, yeah. So, yeah. There we go. Already answered it. Cool. I'll just show that for anybody else that hasn't read through the comments. If I take a piece of sub-D geometry, put that into edit mode, of course I'm looking here and I can, I can select all the different options here. I can select faces, edges, edit points, but if we look at our right-hand joystick right here, we have this icon. It's kind of this blue pyramid, and that's going to visualize the different options that you can select. So if I swing that to the right on the joystick, I can select only edit points. Flick it to the right one more time, only edges. One more time, only faces. And then the fourth time, or the last time, is all of the options here. I usually leave it in all options. That just seems to be easier for me. Okay, so now we have the body pretty well worked out. Let's turn on our sketch layer here. Oops. Not the clean line, but the robot sketch, and get an idea for these legs here. All right, so now we can just turn on our sub-D geometry and shape to it. So actually, I'm noticing that I want this face here, down here, to be exposed so that I can lead that into the legs. So yeah, I'm just gonna All right, just gotta figure this out. Okay. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna drop in 2 points like this, and then select Auto Edge Loops and delete these inner points that I made earlier. And now grab just this edge and connect the middle part here, and then use this little hole that I have here to actually shape the legs here. So I'll turn on Auto Edge Loop and grab this loop, press the pointer finger trigger, and duplicate it out like this. And I'll just stretch it out like that. We'll do the same thing up here. And now we have those like very natural looking, or not natural looking, but gestural legs coming out here. Just like that. We're going to worry about where that connects to the pivot point in a little bit. And yeah, now let's work on the arms, the fun stuff. So here's what we're going to do for the arms. Turn the grid on here. And actually, the grid's pretty spaced out right now, so I'm going to adjust the density so it's a little finer. Let's go for 5 centimeters. And then come here to primitive shapes. Drop in a shape, not a cube, but a cylinder. Just like that. And because we still have grid on, we could just grab it and twist it so that it's facing the right way. Let's duplicate it, twist that so that it's facing the right way for that part of the arm. And then duplicate it one more time down for the elbow. So we have the shoulder, the elbow, and the wrist here. Now we can turn off the grid because we've placed it exactly the way we want it. And because we left it as a primitive shape, we can still adjust the general size of the shoulder like this with these 2 arrows. And use Smart Move to move it along an axis. All right, I think I want the elbow to be a little bit deeper, shoulder to be shallow like that, and then the wrist to be the smallest pivot point. And we'll shift that in a bit. All right, so we're gonna do a little bit of kind of like experimental surfacing for the arms here. So what we're gonna do actually is just start off with a cube. We'll just drop that in here like this, and then grab it, turn it into sub D, and delete the faces. So now we have this like tube-like shape. And let's delete an edge. Let's add another edge in. Let's just shift it around like this, get a weird shape that we want. All right, that looks pretty good. Shrink it down, place it right there. Turn subdivision on, turn auto edge loops on, and now we can drag out that arm like this. And we can grab these edge points here and just move them around in, like, I don't know, very experimental shape for the arm. And we can grab that, duplicate it, and use the same shape for the other part of the arm. Actually, let me just get rid of the sketch for the robot here so we can see that cleaner. All right, awesome. And yeah, now we can go into more depth for the elbows here. So let's just actually make a couple of cylinder shapes like that, bring them together. All right. And if we want, you know, we can come in here and add more edge loops and, yeah, shape this thing. I know it's kind of difficult for everybody to see this because I'm zooming way in, and that's actually usually the way I work, is zoom way out, zoom in, and then, you know, see what I did. And to that, I would basically just say, get comfortable with scaling in Gravity Sketch. It's probably the best friend you have in here. All right, it looks decent. Okay, so for more detail on the shoulders here, we can take that, and now that we have our general shape, we can convert it to sub D here, and, you know, do a bunch of stuff on top of this. Subdivide that, add some edge loops. Maybe this is like, I'm not sure what I'm doing for this, but maybe this is like where it bolts down. I don't know, looks kind of cool. All right, and we're not going to worry about, you know, flowing things in perfectly. Sometimes in Gravity Sketch, you know, this is enough for a render, is basically just intersecting shapes. Let's do the same thing down here. Just add a bit of detail. and merge these two shapes together. Like that. Oops. Yeah, I'll just leave that. All right, turn on Subdivision and click in some extra edit points here. And so basically, one thing you'll notice here is with the cylinder, on the cap of the cylinder, all these points converge to a single point right here, and it doesn't look that great when you subdivide it, so usually I delete that and then shrink something in like this. Okay, cool. Elbow's done. And we'll worry about the bit in a little bit. Let's see if there's any questions. Yes, folding legs to compacted. We simulate a load of dimensions. Oh yeah, there's a bunch of cool things that would that can be done with like simulating stuff in GS. I think right now it's more of a problem of compute power, right? So for instance, most people are using this on an Oculus Quest, and you know, I'm not an engineer or anything, but that's basically a cell phone that it's running on. But I agree that physics and, you know, simulating different things, especially like pivot points, would be very useful. And I mean, who knows? As the hardware gets more powerful, more things become possible. Okay, as far as the legs go, you were right. I wanted to do that. I think we're going to come to that later. Or maybe we won't have time. But one thing I want to do is actually create the sensor house, or the sensor housing up here. So what I'm going to do is actually duplicate up this shape. I know I want to use the original sub-D shape, but I want it to be separate from the rest of the original shape. So I'm going to turn on auto edge loops, duplicate up a surface like this, and then this might look a little tedious, but I'm actually going to delete away the rest of the geometry here and just use, oh no. Okay, looks like I hit a bug here. Sometimes this happens if you have a pretty complex piece of sub-D geometry and you try to delete too much of it away. It will kind of lock you out like this. And I'm not sure if there's a way out of this, to be honest. Might just need to shut. Yeah, I think, unfortunately, guys, I found a bug and just kind of like locked out of what I'm doing right now. I'm going to try one thing, and if that doesn't work, we can end the live stream. All right, just give me 1 second here. Okay, so we're back. I just restarted the app, and I should have known this. This has happened before. Let's see if it's okay. We're good. But basically, if that happens, just restart the app, and you should be fine. The nice thing about Gravity Sketch is it has auto saves, so nothing I was working on is lost. Okay, so this is our sensor housing. I want a pretty tight radius up here. And yeah, now we can drop that down like this, make it dark. And let's do that shelf that I was talking about earlier here. I'm just going to select the entire row of edge loops like that, duplicate it in, shift some points around, like this. Here and here. And then let's turn subdivision off just so I can see in the low poly mode what these surfaces are doing. Select edge loops, drop that down like this, and that's going to be our shelf so far. We're going to mash some other shapes in there as well. Okay. And let's tighten the radiuses here. All right, so let's build out the bit hand here a bit. So I'm going to come in here, duplicate this face out, and then use this option here, restrict face movement. And if I use that, then it will allow me to move exactly along the same direction of the face that I'm working with. All right, and now let's just use some loose geometry here. So I'm going to come down here with the revolve tool, make those pivot points for the wheels, like this, right? If we want to fill in this entire shape, we can go to the graph and adjust thickness there. And then I'm going to match my leg up to fit within that shape, like that. Again, no need to remake things, so let's just unlock all our layers here, delete that wheel, duplicate this over like that. Looks good. And another thing that I want to add here, I'm just going to group all those shapes, is the pivot point down here. And I just want to indicate this, so I'm going to use the revolve tool here. turn that to so that all the thickness is there. Drop this guy back down like that. And then we have something that's like a pretty decent stand-in for a pivot point. Again, if you wanted to, you could add, you know, of course, a bunch more detail there, like the housing. But we're not going to worry about that. Okay, and last thing I want to do, just because I really like the idea of the screen here, is actually just grab the screen, drop it on the surface layer, drop down my sketch here, change this to be a dark color, and because it's sub D already, we can work with the surfaces we already have, like this. Oops, all right, turn off restrict. Turn on subdivision, and let's click on these corners and get ourselves, you know, something round or sharper. Okay. And let's improvise a rail here for it. So we're going to use the planar tool, or the volume tool, with the planar option turned on here. And that allows you to make these really quick volumes. Snapped to a plane. And then you can use this arrow here and select, you know, how far you want that to be extruded out. And what we're going to do is duplicate that and add some more detail here. Okay. And then we can use the revolve tool here to just drop in. Oh, sorry, because I restarted it, I have mirror turned off again. So I had to return that on. All right, and just to add some, you know, a little bit of detail as well, we can come in here and just use the stroke tool to add some like wire detail. Okay, and those little details like that just do a lot for a render, a final render. We can even show some wires, maybe just surfacing a little bit there. We can duplicate the revolve shape we have here and make something that looks like a bolt in here. Maybe we'll do that here as well. And this is kind of what I was saying about not being too precise. Is if anything, I've probably been too precise for this entire demo. I mean, you could just take shapes and drop them in like that, and again, for the purposes of a render, it works really well. You can even do the same thing here. Just duplicate that same shape, drop it over here. Give ourselves a little end cap. All right, and then we could just drop some shapes in here for the batteries. So let's go to, again, grid, turn that on. Just drop in a general shape in like that. Turn the grid off, we don't need that anymore. Convert that to sub D if you want, and make something that resembles a battery pack, or actually, let's use this along the mirror plane. Okay, and let's just slide this big bulky battery pack underneath here. Cool, and let's see this in the setting with everything else. So turn our peeps on here. Whoa, okay, so the robot is just going through his body. All right, let's shift that back a bit. Turn on the people, turn on the table that we built here, and I'm actually gonna group together this entire robot like this. Make sure I got all the pieces there. And let's go very dark on it, and then ungroup it. And lighten up some of the body parts on it, like that. Oops. We'll go red on the wires again. Might be too red though. There we go, something like that. Okay, lighter on the screen. Let's go like some sort of dark purple on the joints. And on these little legs down here. All right, so let's see if you guys have any questions, and then I think this is probably a good part to wrap it up today. I'll do one last thing where group the arm together, duplicate that out, and okay, so this is a really bad way of simulating like what the pivot points are going to be, but I'm just going to drag and rotate it out like that, and then regroup it, and then spin it like this. So we'll see how far these arms can actually extend. I mean, it's not the cleanest thing in the world, but it does a good job. So now we can see that this can very clearly just, you know, cut off this guy's feet. All right, and let's check out the comments, see if there's any questions. All right. No comments. I think that's where we're going to end it here today. Thanks so much for showing up, everyone. And yeah, we do these every Tuesdays, or every Tuesday and Wednesday. So, you know, take a look at Google and or at YouTube and you know, join them. And feel free to ask any questions. Sorry if I didn't do that great at questions today, but I didn't see anything in the chat, so hopefully I didn't drive anybody away from asking a question. But yeah, thanks again for showing up. And I think I might do a key shot render with this and try and drop it on our Instagram channel. So if you guys want to check us out there as well, you can see the, you know, the final product from what we did today. So, all right, thanks everyone. See you later.